What we're seeing is a competition between autocratic behaviors and democratic behaviors, and you can see them, both of them, in quite a few countries. So it's not as if there's good guys versus bad guys, black versus white. The world is more nuanced. I mean, the Cold War was also more nuanced, but it's more nuanced than we remember the Cold War.
Now we look at things like, maybe is this a Cold War all over again? What do you think of the idea that we're in a Cold War II?
So I don't like the idea that this is a Cold War 2.0 or however clever way you want to put it, because that gives the impression, I mean, admittedly, the Cold War was also more nuanced, that there's sort of two camps, in two different geographies, and they're separated by a Berlin Wall, and, the Democrats are on one side and the communists are on the other side. And that's actually not the world that we live in. So the world that we live in is more nuanced. And inside the United States, we can find autocratic behaviors and practices, and as we've already discussed, autocratic propaganda. And actually, inside Russia, you can also find, they've been pretty crushed in recent months, recent years. But there has been in Russia, for the last couple of decades, a genuine movement for the rule of law and for some kind of democracy. And you can see democracy movements, you still see them all over the world. In Venezuela, which is also very ugly dictatorship, the Democrats galvanized enough to win an election. Some months ago, they didn't manage to persuade Maduro, who's the dictator of Venezuela, to actually leave power. But they legitimately won. They organized themselves. They organized a way of counting and publicizing the votes separately from the official count. So you saw really millions of people involved inside of an ugly dictatorship. You saw millions of people were able to organize and put on a kind of display of democratic unity. So what I want to say is what we're seeing is a competition between autocratic behaviors and democratic behaviors, and you can see them in both of them in quite a few countries. So it's not as if there's, as I said, good guys versus bad guys, black versus white. The world is more nuanced. I mean, the Cold War was also more nuanced, but it's more nuanced than we remember the Cold War.
Mm-hmm. So not a Cold War 2.0. What do you make of the idea that perhaps it's a cultural revolution 2.0 in America with the attack on universities, science, that sort of thing?
Well, so, it's funny. I've heard this from more than one person. The Chinese right now are looking at watching what's going on in the United States, especially the attack on universities. The Chinese really revere universities, including American universities, and science and knowledge and research. And they put, billions of dollars into it in themselves. And they were very shocked by the attack on not just Harvard, Columbia, and more broadly on the scientific funding mechanisms and the National Institute for Health and so on. And to several people I know who've been in China or in touch with people in China recently, they've compared it to the Chinese Cultural Revolution. And for those who don't know, the Chinese Cultural Revolution was a 1960s event when kind of young so-called Red Guards staged a revolution against it was often at universities, not only, but against their professors, against establishment figures. All those people were sent to, labor camps in outer Mongolia or somewhere on the outside of China. And there was, real destruction of academic institutions and cultural institutions all over China. And it's now, of course, viewed in the Chinese memory as a huge mistake, because it was a disaster for science and it was a disaster for art, and architecture was destroyed and so on. And the Chinese look at what's going on in the U.S. now, and it looks to them like that. Obviously, it's not the same, and there isn't the same level of violence, and we don't have struggle sessions, or at least not yet, or anything like that. But it is true that this kind of concerted attack, especially on science, on scientific institutions, but even on the idea of research, on expertise. And it's happening in a lot of different ways. Of course, on vaccine expertise, that's also has the potential. We aren't there yet. There's still institutions intact, but it really has the potential to undermine and destroy the most successful thing America does, which is scientific research, and to set us back by, by men. I mean, of course, it's not something people are going to feel right away. It will take a lot of time before you notice that the cancer treatment that should have been there isn't there, or the vaccination program that protected children from childhood diseases, is so weak that people are dying of polio again. I mean, that will take years to develop. But the destruction of these things, whether it's vaccine mandates or whether it's scientific research funding, or whether it's, universities, this can happen very fast. And it does look and feel, to the Chinese who know what they're talking about, it looks a little bit like a kind of cultural revolution. Yeah.